Hello, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Red Dot Forum Camera Talk. This is a special one. This is our 50th episode, but before we jump in, let's do intros because we always forget to do that.
That's right.
I am David Farkas. I am joined, as always, by Josh Lair.
How you do?
We've got Jose Rivera over there producing the show.
Over there, that they can't.
Over
Somewhere.
Well, there.
Here.
Right there,
He's
right
right
there. He's right there. Okay, yep. In that little box, he's locked away. Today, Kirsten's actually not joining us in the chat. She's doing other interesting things, but Juliana is monitoring it for us.
Is she?
And I think so.
Okay.
I think so. So give a shout out to Juliana.
All right.
And so it's hard to believe that we have survived this many episodes.
What it's not hard to believe is even after 50 episodes, we still can't start on time. That seems to be a common theme.
It's 8 o'clock somewhere.
But if you're a true fan of the show, you know not to bother tuning in until 8:05. So
That's right.
that's how we know the diehards.
That's how we know. That's how we know.
So what is the topic of today's show?
Well, in keeping with the spirit of the show, we sort of set this tradition that every 10 shows or increments of 10, we do an Ask Us Anything. That gives kind of a breather of maybe, last couple shows we did were really heavy on the technical with the firmware of the new, for almost all the cameras. We covered all that in the last two episodes. I think also in there somewhere we had a catastrophic power failure.
Hey,
We pretend that never happened.
Fun
The weather,
times.
it's fantastic outside right now, so let's just hope for that.
you had to bring it up.
I had to bring it up. We just got to clear the air, man. Got to clear the air. So we're going to do an Ask Us Anything. So anything goes. We have
I think it's important to differentiate.
not everything. Not everything.
Well, number one, the show is called Ask Us Anything, not Answer Anything. So you
Okay,
can ask whatever
okay,
you want,
okay.
but doesn't mean we're going to answer it.
True.
As always, we are not able to address or answer questions about when is such and such a Leica coming out or what is Leica going to do in the future or anything like that. We're not going to speculate. We don't know. So that's just a topic we don't cover. So
I feel like we need a thing right there.
we love the
Disclaimer,
new stuff.
disclaimer.
We're super stoked when new things comes out, but we're waiting with bated breath just like all you guys are. So
Yep.
things to keep in mind. So every 10 episodes, this is our fifth one, being episode 50. We just came back. We've been off air for about a month. Our last show, for lack of a better term, was our in-person episode in Colorado Springs for the International Leica Society, the LHSA.
That was a lot of fun.
It was awesome. We had a full house. We have to thank the LHSA for hosting us
Big thanks,
and giving
big
us
thanks.
that venue and everybody for showing up. And we got tons of great questions and we showed tons of cool gear. And if you didn't go, you
What's
missed out.
amazing is, I always feel that these shows go by so lightning quick. I know it kind of drones on for the rest of you, but for us, it's like just sheer
Yes,
terror,
yes.
like rapid fire.
Yes.
It went even faster in person, staring at a live audience, if you will. And
Yeah.
it was certainly a different kind of element. We even stood up and we showed we have legs.
That's right. There was some standing involved.
There was
moving.
legs. Yeah.
It was great. It was really cool. If you are not familiar with the LHSA, you can go to lhsa.org and check them out. If you are a Leica enthusiast, you basically should be a member. They have a lot of really cool events. They have a lot of good resources for Leica enthusiasts. It's a great organization. We're both members, as is Jose. So,
And Kirsten and I will be attending the annual meeting in Dublin, Ireland in October. So that'll be a lot of fun. And look, it's not Colorado Springs, it's Ireland, but we certainly would welcome going to that.
we did we may do another in-person show at the next USA spring shoot. So if you missed this last one, keep that in mind. Sign up for whenever that gets announced.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It was a lot of
we had
fun.
a blast. It was
And
cool.
of course, then there's the after questions and and we had an intermission too.
And it was an open bar.
Yes,
There was alcohol served.
there was.
So
And,
that made it,
and consumed.
it was really cool.
Made us much more interesting.
Yes, we had a blast. So all right, let's dive into it. Jose, we had some
We
questions.
do have an announcement though.
Oh yes, I forgot.
Another
Oh,
announcement.
sorry. Yes.
So talking about travel, we have 3 spots remaining for our upcoming Iceland photo adventure, which will be led by Colin and Kirsten, who are awesome photographers, instructors, and human beings. So you will want to join on that. I have done this trip a lot of times, and it never ceases to just floor me. It is incredible landscape there. If you haven't been to Iceland, you got to go to Iceland, and these are some of the best spots in the Highlands and South Coast. Not with the tour groups, and all that. We're out doing the photography thing. So it's a small trip, maximum of 12 people, and only 3 spots left. You want to sign up for that, and you can do that at leicastarmiami.com. I'm just going to do a
You
quick...
gave him the dates, right?
I'm about to, but I don't...
August 23rd to September 1st.
It is.
Yes. 2020, this year. So you've got little bit of time to plan. You've got 3 spots left. So if you want to check it out, David can show you.
Right there.
There it is.
There it is. So Leica Store Miami, and if you go under Destination Workshops here, you can scroll down, and right there.
There it is.
There it is. So August 23rd through September 1st, 3 spots remaining, and you can go to places like this, which is Haiafoss, which is amazing.
Sweet.
Yes.
All right. I think that's all the housekeeping for now.
I think so.
We got some questions submitted ahead of time, so we're going to try to get to those first. I know there's probably 8 million questions in the chat, so we're going to try to be efficient and try to avoid any of David's rambling stories. Oh, sorry, you're right here.
Oh, awkward.
Jose, what do you got for us?
Those are always fun, All right, let's go with the first one. I have both the S and SL system. Going forward, which would you choose for landscape work and for general photography?
That's a good question for you, I think.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation earlier today. And it's, as someone who was such a huge supporter of the S system from the early days, I mean, Josh and I both were involved with the S system from introduction or pre-introduction, actually.
Yeah.
That was back when it was kind of an interesting product launch because they talked about the camera well before it was announced, which everyone wants Leica to do, but it was sort of it causes its own set of problems. But I've used the S2, the S006, the S007, and the S3 all in pursuit of landscape photography, which is my personal passion. And the 4 generations of S cameras were my primary tool for over 10 years. Until the end of 2019 rolled around, and Leica sent me an SL2 to do some field testing, and I took it on a few trips, and I took it on a few more trips, and a few more trips, and a few more trips.
They get it.
So the SL2 has definitely slotted in and become my main landscape camera system, and I'm going to give the same, just here are the high points. Why? What you see is what you get. The mirrorless EVF experience is fantastic, especially for composition, seeing what you get. The ease of use, second to none, and of course the ability to use mixed lenses, so I can use M lenses in there if I wanted to, keep it small. I can use TL lenses, but also having access to the SL lenses and the zoom. So as good as the primes are, and they really are outstanding, and as good as the S lenses are, and I have a whole article about how great the S lenses are, no doubt. But the flexibility and the capability of the 16-35, the 24-90, and the 90-280 just cover everything. And it's all fully weather sealed. I don't have to be changing lenses out in the field. It's just an awesome system. Oh, look, it's right here. This is mine. So I really love the SL2 for landscape. That being said, I think the S system definitely still has a place. The lenses are outstanding. We've talked about this before, and we have apologized because we have 50 episodes in the can, right? So
we have two episodes on the S system.
We do. We have 2 episodes on the S system.
Yeah.
We have episodes in the SL system. We even have an episode on landscape photography.
You got to speed up the answer.
I got to speed up the answer.
More questions to get to.
But bottom line, either of those tools are going to do the trick for you. I think the SL2 just keeps things a little smaller and flexible. And then every time I look at my S files, I'm wowed at the image quality.
The reality is David's creative and photographic objectives changed when he had access to the SL system, because the S system, the S3, is about chasing that last 1% of maximum ridiculous performance.
Yeah.
And David did that for a while, and then he changed his approach based on what he was doing, and that's unique to what David was shooting.
Yeah.
And I think he's been rewarded with, yes, not as stunning files, but the ability to do things you couldn't do with the S. And so he changed tack based around that. Obviously, everybody else's objectives are going to be different, but there's still nothing better than medium format when you're, again, chasing that last nth degree of like crazy detailed tonal range and malleability in post-production. And also for making stunningly large prints, which David doesn't really do. Really don't make prints.
Not that big anymore.
No,
Yeah.
not anymore, right? So, yeah. Good question, though. Next one, please.
This came from Jim via email. Can you discuss more in depth what it means when Leica describes a camera or lens as having better contrast? Better contrast.
Well, the short answer is contrast is simply how much space there is, how many tones of gray there are between white and black. Less tones, more contrast, more tones, less contrast. Over the years, the general trend for Leica's cameras has been lower contrast out of camera because the sensor's dynamic range is increasing, and an increase in the sensor's ability to render those middle tones is going to decrease contrast because there's just more tones to work with. Some lenses are higher contrast than others. I think that the Noctiluxes and Apos tend to be a little on the lower contrast side, and the Elmerits and Sumerits tend to be on the little higher contrast side. But in the end, we're almost splitting hairs at this point now because we have so much dynamic range available to us on cameras like M10R, M11, SL2, that the inherent contrast or lack thereof built into one particular lens is basically going to be rendered moot by whatever you do in post-production.
Agree. I mean, look, when we're dealing with 14 stops-ish of dynamic range on the SL2 or 15 stops on the M11, it's splitting hairs, and we no longer need, Leica used to make particularly low contrast lenses for film use, for high contrast scenarios, like the 28 Summicron, the 21 Elmerit. Those were all lower contrast lenses. They were still very sharp, but they were able to handle higher dynamic range situations on film where you only have 8 stops. Now we have so much more dynamic range than we ever had on film. And now we don't really need that. We're looking for just general high performance and a similar fingerprint between the different lenses.
There you go. I think we can stop it there.
Yeah.
Good answer. Good question. What's next?
All right. Let's see. When you load photos into Lightroom, is the camera profile for like an M10R automatically loaded, or do you have to choose the profile in the software somewhere?
Sometimes. Depends how, like, for instance, I have import presets for various cameras, and I don't necessarily find the embedded profiles to be particularly accurate in most cases. So, case in point, I was just in Paris shooting with the M11, and I was reminded to update my profile because, or my preset, because as the files came in, it was saying like M11, and interestingly, it said profile not found because that was, I guess, early on embedded stuff, and it's not there anymore. And when I changed it from the embedded M11 to Adobe Color, it just looks so much more natural, much more pleasing color palette. So there's no, how do I put this gently? There's no,
You can't, just say it.
there's no perfect camera profile that's 100% accurate. And you probably wouldn't want something that's 100% accurate because it might be also 100% boring. We like pleasing things. The reason that people like certain films is because they had a pleasing color palette to their taste, whether that's Portra or Provia or Velvia or whatever, or a certain flavor of Kodachrome 64 or what have you.
Wrap it up.
Every different film,
Get it.
there's no accurate film, right?
Right. So I guess
profiles are like choosing your
so we
film.
can move on. Season to taste.
Sure.
That's it. But the answer there's not really a great answer to that because it depends on your import presets. But
Oh, you had to say it depends.
I think that, but that's a good answer. Let's keep going. I just know how many questions we're going to have, so I'm just going to,
I would just default
here
and
we
say
go.
the best results, at least that I've found for Leica cameras,
Yes.
is Adobe Color or Adobe Standard if you don't like it quite as punchy.
okay, thank you. That's a good, concise answer.
How's that?
I like it.
You got it.
All right, what's next?
All right. All right. So using an M lens with the adapter on the SO2S, will the focus assist option work, like magnification, focus peaking?
Well, you don't have automatic focus magnification because the camera doesn't know when you're turning the focus ring on an M lens like it does on an M camera, which has a physical thing touching something else. but you still can have the focus assist activated manually with the joystick button or a custom function button of your choice. You still get focus peaking. You still get the ability to move the point around to see where it's in focus. You still get the grids and the level and the histogram. So yeah, the only thing you're giving up is an SL lens will magnify automatically because it's electronically controlled focus, where an M lens will have to be manually magnified.
Now, this is curious little brain seizure here, but I remember back in the SL601, it would detect a manual focus contrast change. Like a manual focus lens, and it would engage automatic focus magnification. Do you remember that?
Oh, wait, which camera?
On the SL601.
No, it never worked like that.
Initially it did.
No, the setting didn't work. It was like a bug. You're crazy.
Okay.
We have a super chat.
Okay.
It's from who? From Bryant? Yes. I'll ask it.
Sure.
Here or if you have that. Okay, move your hands. Oh, there's a few questions here. Okay, we're going to get to them real fast. Favorite M lens, one lens to rule them all. Let's just answer. You first. Just say it. I know you can't pick. We can't just pick one, so we're going to say.
I'm going to pick one.
We're going to pick one.
Okay. And it's going to make a lot of people mad, but I'm going to go 35 Apo M.
Okay. 75 Noctilux for me. Easy. Okay. Experience with heat and the SL2, meaning how hot can it get? You
never had a problem.
Yeah, I've never kept it in a hot car. Well, we have. We have actually.
In a hot car, I wouldn't recommend that. Although Florida, generally everything is hot.
I can't say I've ever had an issue, but I've never subjected a camera. Like, I'm so cognizant of like, okay, where am I going to be? Where's it going to sit? But I've been out all day in the Florida sun with an SL2, like all day.
I mean, I think the worst heat that I had was when I was testing the SL2S and I was doing video all day. I was in Sanibel, Florida, and it was August or something, and it was just brutally hot. Like I was dying.
Yeah.
The camera is fine.
The last question is, do we ever use the CM? Oh, I wish. The CM, which is a point-and-shoot film camera made in Germany, has become impossible to find, ridiculously expensive. They're super, super cool. I've shot with them. It's funky. I don't really shoot a lot of film anymore. I don't shoot any film anymore.
And trivia, I gave one as a wedding present to my wife.
There you go. CM. So cool, but they have just become too rare for me to even get my hands on one. So thank you for the super chat. All right, let's get back to the list, Jose, please.
All right. So I guess there's like a two-part question about the M11. At what ISO does the M11 files become inferior to the M10 Monochrome files? And what is the benefit of BSI on the M11?
Sure.
Okay. I can answer the first one if you want to answer the second one. I'll let if you want. Why don't we both answer the first one? Because my experience,
what's your experience?
3200 is about where I'm starting to see.
3200 or 32,000?
3200 ISO is where I start to see slight differences. I looked at this the other day.
Okay.
It's not dramatic, but if you look, especially in shadows that you bring up, on M11 files converted to black and white versus M10 monochrome, you start to see a little difference at 3200. It's small, but it's there.
And I'd say, well, see, you have to wait. There's a few different complicating variables. We're not talking apples to apples, right? Because you're comparing a 60 megapixel sensor versus a 40 megapixel sensor. So viewing magnification,
I scaled my 60
blah.
down to
you
40.
did.
Yeah,
okay. And the other factor is the M11, better than any camera that I've seen, takes noise reduction. I mean, better than anything.
Yeah.
Any other Leica camera, the M11 takes stupid amounts of noise reduction without a loss in detail. So I think if we zero out the sliders, I'm going to agree with you that probably around 32 to 6400. Yep.
Because of what David's saying, it's never that straightforward.
But in a processing carefully scenario, I'm going to stand by the fact. I'm going to say that the maximum usable on the M10 monochrome I've said before is 32,000 ISO. I would say, and converted to black and white, I'm going to say somewhere between maybe 16,000 to 25,000 on the M11.
Okay, that's fair.
Would be equivalent to where 32,000. So
I think you're giving M11 a little too much credit, but I think also depends on how you convert.
Yeah.
Because it depends on how much blue channel you're using, how much green channel you're using, how much red channel you're using, because different channels have more noise and less noise. It's not that simple of an answer.
But I'll say 16,000.
Okay, I think I would say that.
So we're looking at, and those are big numbers, but math still works the same. So 16 to 32 is one stop.
So let's get the next question. Benefit of BSI sensors, which we talked about.
We did.
In the SL2S video and the M11 video, but the short answer is?
more photosensitive area on the front of the sensor because the electronics are on the back of the sensor. Like we said before, there's no light shining from the back of the sensor illuminating the front.
Yeah.
It just means that it's all the electronics for capturing and moving the electronic signals into the camera off the sensor are in the back, not interlaced with the photosensitive area on the front of the sensor. So it just makes for bigger, more light gathering area. And also keeps it cooler because you don't have the front of the sensor getting hot. The heat is dissipated off the back. So
Right.
2 main advantages.
Excellent.
Are
Next
there
question.
any disadvantages to the BSI sensor?
No.
No. It just took time to get to the point where they could make it big enough.
Yes.
Let's go to the next one. What is the best way to determine my M camera will require calibration? Does the adjust in CLA include calibration?
Sure, take that.
Sure. We talk about this a lot in our buying and selling pre-owned episode, but if you have an M camera with live view, meaning M240 or newer, mine is like the 262, you can actually put the camera on a tripod, point it at something with a lot of contrast and sharp lines, like a book or a poster or something with text, focus with the rangefinder carefully until the rangefinder is lined up, and then use live view magnification to see if, in fact, the rangefinder lining up is coinciding with the image being in sharp focus. If it is, you're good. If it's not, the camera is probably going to require a calibration. And the C in CLA stands for, well, I guess it stands for C clean.
Clean. Doesn't stand for
Yeah, it
calibration.
doesn't say, no, it doesn't say. No, the A stands for adjust. We're just getting started. So yes, a CLA is
I
going
think
to.
the W stands for wrong.
Yes, very wrong. Very wrong.
No,
yes.
CLAW.
A C.
Claw.
Yes, if you send an M camera for a CLA, part of that is going to include a calibration to a known standard. So as long as your lenses are also calibrated, you're going to be fine. If your lens, so you generally want to test a camera with more than one lens, so that you know that it's actually the camera if it's actually the camera or the lens. So if you just test one camera and one lens, you may not know which one is the one that's out.
I'd also say make sure as well that you're not just testing minimum focus. Generally, if I'm testing calibration, I like to do it at minimum focus, which is on most lenses 0.7 meters. I like to do another one at, say, 1 to 1.5 meters, middle distance, or 2 meters, let's say. So let's say 0.7 meters, 2 meters, and then do an infinity test of something really far away down the street, just so you make sure that you don't have any issues in the calibration anywhere in that area.
Yeah.
And like Josh is saying, he's saying, test with the rangefinder, then check in the VisiFlex. You can also, if you want to double check your work, do it the other way as well. So try, because sometimes on the VisiFlex in live view, when you're magnified, you can kind of go past the point of focus, pull back, and then find your middle ground, then look in the rangefinder and see if it's perfectly aligned or not. So I would suggest doing it Josh's way
Now,
first.
before somebody yells at me,
doing it
if you
again.
don't have live view, if you're still talking about a digital M, you can still shoot a picture and then bring it into Lightroom and look at it.
Of course.
If we're talking film, well, you have to shoot a roll of film and then send it to get it processed. A little more work. That's actually one of the reasons that overwhelmingly 90% of the analog M cameras that we sell pre-owned have been CLA'd, because I can't go shooting a roll of film in every single film M that we get. It would take forever. So we just send them in, they get them calibrated, bring to a known state, and then they're good. And nowadays, I can't think of the last time an analog M went out the door or had a calibration issue because of that reason.
Sure.
Good question. Let's go next.
Okay. Any tips when changing lenses, especially with regard to keeping the sensor clean?
The two big things I would say is, number one, make sure that you're blowing air on the back of the lens, on the rear glass here, because you can get dust and grit that gets kind of stuck and that can fall onto your sensor, because the shutter, if it has a shutter or a mirror, is drawing air inward and can bring some of that dust in. And also just do it upside down and you're good.
Sure.
Easy. Next.
Don't be in the wind.
Obviously, yes. Yeah, don't do it in the Sahara Desert. Yeah.
Facing down, like the camera facing down?
Yeah, get the camera pointed down. Correct.
I violated all of those rules recently, but
Yeah,
we'll just
well,
go.
that's okay. Next.
Rule breaker.
Next question.
All right. Should I remove the battery from the camera when changing lenses to prevent dust on the sensor?
No. No need.
No.
Okay.
Next.
Is there anything you like about the M10R over the M11?
Less expensive, pre-owned. readily available.
The black one is brass, if that's your thing, and it has a base plate, if that's your thing.
Yeah. I think.
If you have an M10 monochrome,
Yeah.
then you can use the same battery and charger and everything, and same base plates.
And right now, the M10R represents the final iteration of the M10 platform, so 5 years of developing and polishing. The M11 represents something brand new. We've seen a few firmware updates already. So there's a stability and a I don't want to say reliability because that's not really the right word. Maturity to the M10R that the M11 doesn't have yet. So there's something to be said about that, I think. Good question, though. Next.
Okay. I use a small backpack instead of a camera bag when carrying my Leica gear in a big city. Do you have any other tips to avoid advertising mug me?
I don't know.
No. The reality is, if somebody wants to mug you, they're going to mug you. I don't think it matters. If you have a backpack that's behind you, ideally you'd have locking zippers because somebody could easily just be right, just unzipper and take it out.
Sure.
That's why we both generally use shoulder bags that we can kind of put to the front of us with like buckles or something a little bit harder to maneuver.
And just my thing is always, things can be replaced. People can't. So, if it comes down to it where someone wants to take your camera and just give it to them.
Yeah, it's just a camera.
It's just a camera. Cameras can be replaced. Your well-being is much more important than a material thing.
There you go. Next question.
Right. Could you tell me how the Leica 23mm f2 Summicron TL shoots on an SL2, like 35mm on this Leica CL, or like a 23mm lens?
Well, it has the distortion of a 23, the field of view of a 35. So it doesn't look like you put a 35 Summicron on an SL2.
It's pretty flat field though.
It's pretty flat,
Yeah.
but it's not a replacement for a 35 Summicron. It's just a very nice, very small, very inexpensive autofocus lens to have on an SL2. But it's not as good as the 35 Summicron M. Or not even close to a 35 Summicron SL.
No,
Not even close.
but it's barely bigger than, this is an 18 CL, and it's just slightly bigger than this. So if you are looking for something nice and compact, why not? If you're okay with 20 megapixels on your SL2, go for it. I mean, Josh is a huge proponent of using
As I've
TL
talked about many
lenses.
times,
Yeah.
I have a 60 macro on my desk that I use every day on the SL2. So cool. Good question. Next.
Okay. All right. If you own the Q2, does it make sense to buy a Q2 monochrome? Will image quality be drastically improved over Q2 shooting on monochrome mode?
I think it's time for a.
Hmm.
I think
Number
it's time for
one, we have a video
demonstration.
on the Q2 monochrome, an episode which you should definitely watch.
And I'm going to show them
And
this.
David has the answer to that question.
Right here.
That's
That's it.
Oh, okay.
So I want to show you this. Let me make that a little bigger. Okay. So I have this article here under the field test section and under red dot forum. Let me just make this a little larger. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Now you can see Q2 monochrome versus M10 monochrome versus Q2 versus M10R. This is kind of a big showdown here. And I want to show the bottom line of that particular finding. Where are we? Nope, we're still in M. This was a very...
Comprehensive.
That is one way to put it. So I'm going to show you, let's say, where is a good play? Okay, let's say at 6400.
This is Q2 versus monochrome, though.
Whoop, that's the wrong one.
Going.
Is that?
Nope.
Nope. So it's in the middle somewhere. I feel like I had a quick link for this, but
You should.
I should.
You should add these. Oh, wait, there you go.
There it is. Okay. So will you see a difference?
But they probably won't see it on YouTube, but you should look at this article.
I think so. I think they'll see it. Okay, so let's go to 12,500, 6,400. Where do you want to see it?
Let's go 6,400.
Okay, so 6,400. And here you can see the Q2 monochrome is on the left, the Q2 is on the right, and at least on I'm looking at the screen and you can see it at home because these files are available. The Q2 monochrome at 6,400 is just like base ISO. It's perfect. the Q2 converted with careful technique is showing a little bit of noise, and there's
detail.
not as much detail. When you actually go down, I did something called ideal maximums, which is just kind of cutting to the chase here, which we will show. And you can see here that 25,000 on the left on the Q2 monochrome is giving the same detail as the Q2 at 6400 on the right. These are almost identical images from the two different cameras at two very different ISO settings.
Nice.
So that's what
to make a long story short, check out David's Showdown article on Red Dot Forum that compares the Q2 and the Q2 monochrome to understand the answer to that question visually.
And the answer is yes. There's a big difference when you're getting to low light ability.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Next question.
Okay. Hi, I want to buy a 50mm M lens for my M10R camera. What do you recommend? The Apple or the Noctilux 1.2?
Well, those two lenses are dramatically different, which means you have a choice to make. Do you want the absolute highest level of performance, or do you want a vintage rendering that shoots at 1.2? The 50-1.2 is not a sharp lens. It's not a high-performing lens. It's not. It's a
1966.
Yes, 60-year-old, almost 60-year-old lens that just happens to be
56 years old.
No,
56 years old.
Whatever. It's an old lens. 50 Apo is the sharpest 50 that Leica makes. So it's just going to depend on what your objectives are. Those lenses are, you could easily own both, budget aside, and they would give you two totally different shooting experiences and totally different looks. And I use both, so I can say that pretty comfortably.
Sure.
Next question.
It also looks really cool in the camera.
It does. Next question.
Can you talk about the different viewfinder magnifications and why they have changed over the years?
Oh, okay.
I'm going to say, if you want to learn about this in more depth, we had the 15 Years of Digital M episode, which we covered every single viewfinder magnification of every single digital M. And in our analog M episode, you covered us also in detail of every generation. But I'll
give the very short version.
Give the short version.
In the analog days, we started with 0.91 on the M3, which gives you more magnification. It's closer to life size, which would be 1.0x. And it makes the focus patch as large as possible. The downside being the widest frame lines you had were 50. Then we went to 0.72, which is what we basically still have today, which allows you to see frame lines from 28 all the way to 135. They had analog M's in 0.58, which made it easier to see the wide angle frame lines, and 0.85, which made it easier to see the
like 90.
We made the focusing patch larger so you could be more precise with 90 and 135. And now we have 0.73 on the M10 and newer, which is kind of the sweet spot. So they don't do the different viewfinders anymore on any of the cameras. You can have, like I've had older analog M's converted, you can get an M6, turn from a 0.72 to a 0.58 if you're willing to spend like $2,000 and wait 6 months. So I don't know if that's worth it or not. But that's the short version. We started with 0.91, went to 0.72, 0.58 and 0.85 existed for a little while as alternatives, and now we have 0.73 on the M.
And there was also some digital weirdness in there, 0.68.
Yeah, they had 0.68, and then the body got thinner, and they mixed it up. Yeah, so that's the short version. I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole too much today, but if you watch our History of Analog M episode, as well as our 15 Years of Digital M, we cover that in a lot more detail.
Yes, every single model.
Very
camera.
thorough.
Yeah.
Next.
Any thoughts on the Titanium Edition MA?
It looks awesome.
This is a touchy subject. It's beautiful. I've seen one. I've handled it. It's amazing. I've handled the Titanium MP, which was a Japanese market camera years ago. It feels very much like that, except now we get it here. It's no longer forbidden fruit. It is a beautiful piece. Unfortunately, the demand was far greater than the supply, as is often the case with Leica limited editions. So I think it's going to be a timeless classic because it's a film camera. I think Leica has proven that they can make something beautiful out of titanium, as we've seen with the M7, the M9, the MP240, and of course the MP. And it's a fascinating material. It's too nice to use. So if you want to use one, unless your name is Jackie, you're probably not going to do it. So as a collector piece, super cool. As a user piece, just too nice. Even though ironically, titanium
Which is ironic. It's so much
to be more durable. Yeah. If you ever get to see one, hold the body cap, because the body cap is titanium and it feels it feels like plastic, but it's metal. It's fascinating. So the good news is if you couldn't get this special edition set, Leica has a habit of doing these somewhat often. So you just keep an eye out for the next one, and it's always cool stuff. Next question.
Yeah. Well, it's with the special editions. I mean, there's a few angles here. If they were less limited and more people could get them, then they wouldn't be quite as desirable, and you wouldn't want them. So it's like, where is that perfect amount where everybody who wants it can get one, but it doesn't devalue it for everyone that did get it?
Yeah, I mean, Leica wants to make lots of great mainstream products and then have some fun and have a little bit of exclusivity with certain products. But keep in mind that 99% of their product folio is regular production. And then every now and then, and they've been doing this for years and years and years. This is not a new phenomenon.
No. Do you know how many special edition M6s there were?
Tons. Yeah. So I think that in the end, this is something that Leica does. This is not a secret. There is more demand than there is supply, but they keep doing it. I don't think they're going to stop anytime soon. So I'm excited for what's next.
And I would address,
yes,
not that I see a question about it, but I've heard this comment of, well, they should focus less on special editions and more on making 35 APOMs and M11s and the things that we can't get. Those are not mutually, it's not the traditional economics curve, macroeconomics curve. They can do both of those things at the same time. And actually the special editions, because they drive sales, that funds a lot of R&D efforts and puts money back into products that, let's say, users want versus collectors. So there's this balance.
Yeah.
And I think that it's great when a company like Leica can do that without diluting their brand and, not losing sight of core values like an SL2 or an M11 or every other product in the portfolio.
Well said. Next.
All right. David, what would you consider the best camera lens setup for astrophotography?
Probably the SL2S or the M11, depending on the conditions. I would say for outdoor, dusty, rainy, whatever, although you probably aren't taking pictures of the stars when it's cloudy.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not going to do the stars.
Generally speaking, the SL2S is going to be the highest performing high ISO color camera that Leica currently has in the lineup. I'm pointing to this one, but this is not an SL2S.
It
looks just like this.
It's just like that.
Let's just pretend that this is, blacked out lettering here. The SL2S is going to perform, let's say, 25,000 ISO, pretty cleanly, responds well to noise reduction. It's going to be a little better than an M11, which we already talked about would maybe top out at around 16,000 or 12,000. So the SL2S is going to get you better high ISO performance. The M11 will get you more resolution, but you can use multi-shot on the SL2S that gets you to 96 megapixels.
But you have limitations on how long your exposure
But you have a limitation where you can only do a 1 second exposure, which may not be enough for certain astro things. I think also one of the best lenses I've seen for astrophotography is the 28 Summilux, the 2814M lens, which is fantastic. Although at one stop slower, say something like a 28 Summicron SL isn't going to be far behind because you have that ISO capability. And hopefully, I know we aren't supposed to do this, but hopefully Leica will come out with the 21 Summicron.
They've announced those lenses that they're going to do
Have.
They just haven't said when. So I don't mind talking about that. Right. They said they're going to do a 21
yes.
and a 24 Apple SL Summicron.
Yes. So for me, that's going to be, I think that will ultimately be the ideal kit, which is going to be an SL2S paired with a 21 Summicron SL. And I think it would be sweet.
I like the very last question, which I want to make sure we get to.
Before I get to
you're
that,
not done yet?
I do want to talk on the topic of astrophotography because it kind of spins my brain up. We are doing our first astrophotography workshop in Moab, Utah this fall.
Sick. Is that on the calendar yet?
Maybe.
I don't think it is. I feel like I haven't seen it.
Maybe. Let me just see real quick before you jump over to me.
No.
It's not.
But if you're interested,
let us know on there.
Sign up now.
So they can't sign up.
You can't
it's
sign
not on the
up.
calendar yet.
You can't sign up now, but you can drop us an email to info@LeicaStoreMiami, and Peter will hit you up if you're interested in that workshop. It's going to be. Do we have dates on that?
I don't think so. It's okay.
Somewhere.
We'll talk. Well, obviously, when it's public or when it's live, we'll talk about it on the show.
It's either September or October.
I really like that question, so I want to
got?
ask Jim D's question.
Oh god.
Our favorite episode of the 50 we've done.
Oh.
Do you have a particularly memorable one?
Well, memorable or favorite?
Yeah.
Memorable in a favorite way. That's a great question, so that's why I kind of jumped ahead there a little bit.
I kind of like the It Depends episode.
That was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
I think the Analog Am episode was a lot of fun for me. Maybe because it was so much fun to gather up all those cameras and show the special
That
stuff.
was a lot of work.
Yes, it was weeks
For
of
you.
work. Yeah, but thank you for reminding me. So I would say that's probably my favorite was the Analog. It's also the one where I learned the most.
Okay.
Just in the research that I do inherently for every show, and having one of every single Analog M in front of me, it was special because you could read about the differences between an M2 and an M3, but then you get them in your hand and you're like, oh, this is cool.
But don't you feel the same way about, say, like the 50mm episode?
I do, but there's something.
had
There's a
everything.
mechanical nature to the Analog Ams you don't get with the lens, and it was really special for me. And I got a lot of really cool special editions. Thank you, Gary. So I would say I have some ideas for future episodes that will probably supersede that. But
Okay.
for now, that's my favorite.
Okay. What about you guys?
Oh, right. Did the viewers have any favorites?
Drop it in
Let
the
us
chat.
know. We're curious. Yeah.
I am legitimately curious also.
Anyone where David dropped something? Oh, sorry. That's all 50.
That's all 50. I like the ones where the power stays on. That's my favorite.
Yeah, those are the 49 out of 50. Those are the great ones.
I like the
All right.
blooper reel one.
Let's
Oh,
like it's on
gosh, the asteroid. We don't talk about that.
Let's go to the next question, Jose.
Okay. Hey David, have you had a chance to try the new Blackmagic RAW through HDMI update for the SO2S? If you ever get around, it would be really useful to have a few sample clips.
I don't have a Blackmagic Video Assist. I do have a Atomos Ninja 5, which it's on my list of things to do when I'm
Not traveling?
Not traveling.
Around the world?
Around the world.
Yeah.
yeah, it's on the list. I will be doing some testing of that, but I don't have any sample footage for you yet. I did update the Atomos, and I do have updated SL2s here in the studio. So I just need to find the time and the correct format to be able to do some testing both in studio under controlled situation as well as outside under really contrasty Miami light and see if it's better or worse than shooting in log and see what we get.
I like this question here. I know I'm jumping around, but whatever.
What do you got?
Because they're fun. What is the best aesthetically looking lens? I have so many.
How can we even?
Well, I would say let's keep it focused on M lenses.
Okay.
What's an M lens that you particularly like?
The look of? Like physically? I mean,
Well, even special editions and stuff like that.
oh.
You have a lot of options now.
Ooh.
Actually, I would say the
The red
LHSA 50 Apo
Ooh,
is
black paint
really,
especially, yeah.
is super nice.
I would say I have a whole so many, but the Leica store in Vienna did a special edition of the M10P called the Bold Gray Edition. They made 60, and it came with a version 235 Summicron that was painted in this gray paint. That was amazing.
It's kind of like the Ghost edition.
No, not like the Ghost Edition. Different. That also 35 Summilux titanium that came with the M9 titanium set. Those are two. But I could go on forever. But that was a great question, so I just had to.
28 Summicron matte black is pretty nice.
Ooh, we had to tease him like that, Jose.
Sorry.
There's a lot of really beautiful.
You can also take the red anodized.
True.
That's very pretty too.
51.4 preospheric black paint, gorgeous. There's so many. I just never.
Or
ends.
all of the lenses that I pick up randomly in your office, like all these vintage chrome lenses, and you're like, don't touch that.
It's like, I have a shell. Oh, you don't even know.
What is it? It's either don't touch that or no, you can't have that.
or both actually at the same time. So funny. All right, that was
Got
cool.
some amazingly cool stuff just sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, my office is
It's cooler than this table here.
I've been here for so long, and yet every day I get to see all this cool stuff. I'm like a kid in a candy store. It is really bad.
And then I get to come in the candy store and try to eat the candy and
Nope,
Yeah.
not allowed.
How dare you? That's so funny. All right, let's get to the
blue satin MP.
It's actually a blue stain, and that was like a Leica store Berlin. They made 10 of them.
Wow.
One of them just sold at auction last year for like $140,000. That's got a 50 lux, which is cool, except the lens is still mechanically or physically the same. It just has that blue stain finish, which is beautiful. But that, I would love to see one in person. I haven't seen a blue stain in person. Anyway, Jose,
Josh,
stop me.
I think this one should be for you.
Okay.
What do you think about the 14 million euro auction camera that sold recently?
Yeah. Well, I saw that camera when I was at the auction preview on the West Coast, and there's collectible for collectible sake, and then there's collectible for historic sake. And because that camera was used and owned by Oscar Barnack, there's a connection to the history of Leica that simply
One of kind.
is priceless.
Yeah.
It's called like a one.
It's a zero. It's a
No,
zero
Leica.
series. Yeah.
You're like
Zero series, and it was personal camera of the inventor of the camera.
So I think the most surprising part is how wrong like the Lights auction got the.
What did they estimate? 2 to 3 million?
2 to 3 million euros. Yeah.
They were way low.
My guess was 5 million. Even I was wrong. But it really excites me that there's that level of enthusiasm and passion for the brand, for the history, for the heritage of the product. And I'm sure that whoever bought it is going to take very good care of it. And
you got to see it in LA, didn't you?
That's what I'm saying. I said that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw it. I mean, it's an unassuming little doodad.
Yep.
But it is a huge piece of Leica history, of photography history, of art history. And I think...
Engineering history?
Seriously, yeah. I mean, I think this will be the premier piece in anyone's collection. There's nothing that I know that's more exclusive and more special in a global sense than that. So really cool.
You think that's going, or how is it going to affect the pre-owned market?
No, it's just too, it's too different. It's not even in the same category as anything else. So no, the pre-owned market,
and there's no comparables.
Yeah, the pre-owned market's been trending upwards the last couple of years. So I think that fits with that, but I don't think it's going to mean, M10Rs are going to get more expensive or anything like that. No.
Unless they were owned by Oscar Barnack.
That's true. That would be a time-traveling M10R. Next question.
Do you guys recommend using UV filters on older lenses like the 50mm rigid Summicron?
Yes.
Yes, because the front elements of those older lenses are so soft, meaning the coating is not as durable as modern lenses, that if you clean it or put anything in contact with it over time, it gets cleaning marks and you can't fix those. So yes, especially if you have a nice condition vintage lens, put a UV filter over it and protect your investment and protect the lens. Good question.
Okay.
Next.
Have the supply chain issues affected Leica's availability versus normal times?
That's hard to say. I know I'm just talking all the talking here,
Yeah.
but the short version is it's hard to say because demand has also gone up. We have M11, SL2, M10 Monochrome, all these things that have been happening the last few years. So we've seen tighter supply, but I think it's more related to the increased demand.
It's unclear. I'm going to say that I think it's affected so many different industries, so many different markets that I think it would be unavoidable to be impacted in or not be impacted in any way. So I'll say yes, although Leica's not exactly being very verbal about it. And I think when we look over the last 2 years, they've done a pretty good job of manufacturing and delivering most products. Some are like, where is?
We know which one that is, but
right.
we're not going to
say that out loud. But
yeah,
I don't. Who knows why the reason on that particular item? But I'd say they've done a pretty solid job of avoiding slowdowns and keeping deliveries flowing for the most part. And kudos to whoever does their ordering and planning and logistics and all that, because that cannot be easy in today's global environment.
There you go. Next question.
Okay. External viewfinders for film Leica M's. Between the metal and plastic bodied versions, is there any difference in the optics?
So the modern Brightline Finders that you can buy today, yes, they have better optics in them and less distortion, which is more noticeable. Like you notice that more than, let's say, a difference in clarity. The older finders, the plastic body finders, are cool and they're super light. The 12008 finder with the locking foot is super obscure, but I happen to like that just because it has a locking foot, which they don't even do now. The differences are kind of like splitting hairs. The new Brightline finders are really expensive. Try to find a used one if you can.
Do they still make the
What?
the non-Leica ones, the ZM ones?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But whatever. I think there's a coolness to a vintage Leica finder. It's very retro style that even if it's not quite as perfect, it's fun. And if it matches your camera, even better. Good question. Yeah. Nerdy question. I like those kinds of questions.
You really do.
Perfect for me. All right, Jose, what's next?
Is there a firmware update for the M10 Monochrome that allows for a highlight exposure setting in the menu?
Yes.
No.
Wait, M10 or
M10
M11?
Monochrome. Yeah.
No. Only for the reason that it is... I'll show you. Where is an M10 Monochrome?
Nope.
That one. The furthest away from me. Thank you.
You got it.
For this reason, they can't see that. Here, for this... Hold it right there. A little lower.
Hold it right there.
There.
Okay.
And flip it. Yeah. That's weird. There you go. Okay. There's my finger. So this right here, why you see the gray and the white and the gray again, and you're on Josh. come over
Go
to
to
me.
David. No, it's fine. It's fine. You can explain it. They get it.
Okay. That is a reflecting pattern on the shutter because the meter. Give me the camera back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're killing me. All right. Because inside the light's coming through the lens, bouncing off the shutter, and then in the bottom there is a light meter. If you look in the M11, let's do the same thing. Hold it over there. Okay.
Gotta get it right.
There you go. You'll notice the shutter is all black. There's no reflecting, and if you flip it up a little bit so they can see the bottom, down in there, there is no light meter at the bottom. Okay, let's come back. So, because there is, the reason there's no light meter through the lens is because the sensor is metering, or the camera is metering off the sensor of the actual picture information that's coming in the camera. The M10 generation is not metering in live view. It is metering physically off the shutter through a reflected light meter. Yes, to answer the question that's bound to show up, there is advanced metering mode, which is metering off the sensor, but because that's not used all the time, and because it's frankly a little laggy, we don't recommend it. We recommend classic metering on the M10 generation, unless you like being about a half second behind your subjects. Yes, that is the reason why, because it is not a live view only camera. Therefore, it doesn't have the features that the live view cameras have, like the Q2, Q2 Monochrome, SL2, SL2S, and M11.
There you go. Next question.
Okay. Let's see. A few weeks ago, David mentioned that you can customize which options are available for the function buttons on the SL2 and SL2S. I can find this customization on my Q2, but not on my SL2S. Where is it?
Because I might have lied.
Well, he misexplained. You can't choose what you can choose from.
You can choose the...
Yes, you only have the full list, or there's no way to narrow down that list.
Correct.
On the Q2, you can do that, but not on the SL2.
Right. You can change your favorites and eliminate favorites or take the favorites menu out altogether.
Yeah.
As far as the custom functions, remember we talked about in the firmware, is they increased number of options from, what was it, 32 to 55 or 58 or something like that?
That's a lot.
And that was because people wanted more options to be available in the custom functions. So it's like, okay, well, here's all of them.
I agree that there should be a way to bring that down, but it may just be too many layers to make sense.
Scrolling through that list.
But in theory, once you set it and you set up your user profiles, you really shouldn't be diving into that menu too often.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Next question.
Okay. Let's see. Can you compare sharpness and dynamic range of the M11 and SL2S?
So the biggest challenge there is there's such a significant resolution difference that I rarely find those two cameras in my head being compared to each other because I'm using them for such different things. I think if you bring the M11 down to 24 megapixels, if you downsample it in Photoshop, it's going to have equal noise performance to the SL2S.
Well, we're talking about noise performance or dynamic range?
Dynamic range.
What was the question? Exact question?
Both.
Sharpness and dynamic range.
I'd say M11 has better dynamic range in the highlights.
It does. It has 15 stops.
Yeah.
So the M11 in the Leica lineup is second only to the S in terms of dynamic range. But the SL2S has less noise, but it also has about half the resolution. So it is very difficult because are you going to up-res the SL2S files? Are you going to down-res the M11 files? Are we talking about a certain print size?
Yeah, I think the objective here is do you need what the SL2S brings, which is
that's a better question.
EVF, autofocus capability, zoom lens capability, weather sealing, yada, yada, yada. Or do you want what the M11 brings, which is that small size, rangefinder capability, and just the fact that it's the M11. So I just use both. Problem solved. And I think, the person who asked this question shoots with a lot of SL2S, so stick with it. You're doing fine.
And if you need resolution on the SL2S and your subject's not moving...
Multi-shot.
Multi-shot.
It's always something that It's just the most slept on functionality
pretty
in the
awesome.
Leica product portfolio is multi-shot.
Yeah.
As long as your subject isn't moving or moving much, multi-shot is your friend. Next.
All right. Can the 90 macro or 35 macro, not exactly,
Maybe
but
Apple macro
Apple
function,
on the macro mode, be used for copy reproduction, like for scanning film? Do they have a flat field of focus?
Yes.
Yes, but buy a film scanner.
No.
Why not?
No. No.
Why?
No, because there is actually
Here we go.
copy stand set up, and I think the performance that you're going to get from a camera with a flat field lens, although I probably would recommend the 90 in this case.
Yeah, not the 35.
No. And they have been shown to actually be better performing than film scanners, and for a very good reason. We had this whole conversation on our last workshop. Because hell, I know when I was doing Imicon scans, it wasn't the scanning time. It was the 20 to 30 minutes of dust
The
spotting.
spotting, yeah. It's a pain in the butt.
So you don't have that on repro stuff that you do on contact scan.
Right, because there's nothing touching the... Yeah, that's true. All right, well, fair enough.
And in fact, you want the absolute best?
Fire away.
I'm going to tie it all together.
Okay, do it up.
Here we go. Ready? Multi-shot on an SL2 for a slide copy. You get 187 megapixel scan.
That would be true.
With no color filter array interpolation, which is as good. So
We're going to do a whole show on slide and film duplication.
no, we're not.
I want to answer the last question there, Jose, because it relates to what I brought with me today. One from Michael Thompson there.
You always have a way to tie it in.
Of course, I got to tie it in.
Sure. What is your favorite vintage Leica lens?
Yes, thank you. I have a lot, but there's one in particular that I really, really enjoy that we almost never get. And we actually got one recently, and I finally have one to show on the show in perfect timing with this question. So everybody knows that we love the FLE, the 35 Lux, it's spheric, it's sharp and amazing and magical.
Put it there.
I'm getting there. But there's a predecessor to that, which now we call the pre-aspheric. Of course, at the time, it was just called the 35 Summilux. And what's so cool about the pre-aspheric 35 Summilux
How small it is.
is just how absurdly small the lens is. We can get to the top-down camera here, Jose, and show it. So here, I'll take off the caps. Okay, so here is an FLE, and here is 35 Summilux pre-aspheric.
Now, in fairness, you do have a hood and a back cap.
Okay. Hold on. Taking off the hood. Taking off the back cap. Now we'll do true. Okay, but even so, look at the size difference there. 3514 Summilux, pre-aspheric, super tiny, fantastic vintage rendering, works perfectly fine on M11, SL2, film camera. Really tiny. They have proven to be fantastic investments as well. For whatever reason, these were also slept on for years, and only recently have started to become, I think, worth, or selling for what they're truly worth. This one we just listed for sale. I don't even think there's photos on the website yet. Unfortunately, no box, but it does have the lens shade, which I'll show you, which is super cool. Super impractical. The 12504 shade, which just looks awesome. Look at this thing. Let's look at the close-up, right? Yes. Sweet. So anyway, this is I like to show cool new additions to the used department sometimes, and this ties into also being one of my favorite vintage M lenses. The biggest downside to this lens is the pretty far close focus. It's like 0.8 meters or 0.9 meters, so it's not great for super close-ups. But if you wanted a hilariously small vintage rendering 35 millimeter lens that's also a 1.4, doesn't get much better than this. Super cool.
Nice. The
There you
question
go.
is it FS? I imagine that means for sale.
It is. It's on the website. Go to new arrivals, and you'll see it there.
And what's the filter size?
It has to go. You have to put the filter in the hood. There's no thread on the lens, but so be it. Yeah, this hood basically unscrews. It's a pain in the butt.
You should do the overhead there.
Here we go.
Do the overhead.
You got the overhead? Yeah. So the lens hood. Sorry, it's just a little bit stuck. Sticky. Here we go. The lens hood unscrews, and then you drop a filter here, and then the lens hood becomes your filter holder. Oh, it's too late, Jim. You already ordered this. Thanks. I'll send it with your M4P. It's sweet. It's really sweet. You'll see. If you ever get the chance to get one of these things, the Leica catalog number is 11870. They made them in Canada. They made them in Germany. The German ones are ridiculously expensive.
Is that Canadian?
This is Canadian, so it's actually affordable and you could use it.
And it's so friendly.
It's been CLA'd too, so.
And it's so friendly. And it was CLA'd by DAG about 2 years ago. So, but you can see the reason I didn't take the hood apart is because there's a pain in the butt to get back. So be warned. It is an old lens, but it's super, super cool.
Cool.
Went off on a crazy tangent there. Next question.
You tangent about vintage gear?
I know, right?
Never.
Who would have thought that would be
my
possible?
gosh. All right.
Okay, let's see what we got. Let's see from the chat. When to use an orange filter on an M monochrome?
When you want more dramatic contrast, especially on a bright blue day, you're going to get much darker, more dramatic skies with puffy white clouds. It's not all the way that you would get with a red filter, but it's definitely gets you pushed in the right direction, makes for some nice pop. Generally speaking, I shoot with an orange filter most of the time. Peter, who does our workshop planning, he shoots with an orange filter on his Q10 monochrome most of the time. So, yeah, use an orange filter.
Okay.
There you go.
And if you want to see what it does, take a shot without it, take a shot with it under various circumstances and see if you like it. Because ultimately, you're the ultimate arbiter of if you should use an orange filter. If you're like, no, I really don't like that look, I don't like how punchy it is and how contrasty it gets, then don't use it. Use a yellow filter or a green filter.
There you go. All right. Next
David,
question.
what do you think about the current state of the S system?
We touched on it earlier, but the S3 still represents kind of the pinnacle of image quality in the Leica lineup. That sensor is still unmatched by everything else when it comes to resolution, dynamic range, depth, and then of course, because it is 60% larger than full frame, you have the advantage of the optics of medium format, meaning if you go and look at my S lens article, I kind of explain that where, for instance, I love the 45 millimeter on the S system, which has the field of view of a 35, but it has the perceived focal length of a 50 millimeter because it is close to a 50 millimeter. So it's very neutral perspective, but it's wider. Or a 24 millimeter, which is a pretty low distortion wide angle, yet it has the perceived field of view of an 18 or 19 millimeter ultra wide, but it still has that very flat field where objects aren't as small in the distance and all that. So if you're after that medium format look that is really difficult to replicate in 35, and you don't mind slowing down a bit, you don't mind the optical DSLR experience, and you want the ultimate in image quality, I'd say take a look at the S system. It's not dead. Leica's still making S3s. They're still making lenses. Just because they're not coming out with new lenses,
it's a mature system.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that there's something bad about the lenses. They are still incredible lenses from the get-go. So they have a full lineup of lenses. They don't really need any more to fill it out. So now it's just a matter of where the body goes. And we're in our 4th generation. I'd say right now, the best value in the S system is picking up a used S007 because it still has more dynamic range than even an M11. It's 15 and a half stops. And the files out of the S Type 007 are just still, when I look at them, are mind-blowing. So give that a serious look. And I think there's also great bargains to be had on used S lenses too.
Yeah, very true.
So
watch our video on the S system. Read David's article. Well, there's a lot of great content I read out for him about the S system. The S lens guide is awesome if you're new to the system. And there's S content from Iceland. It is the quietest system because it's so specific. And let's be real, it's expensive, but there's nothing better when it comes to outright performance.
yeah, just take
Go to David, Jose, not me.
just quick thing here. So under on Reddit forum, under more, under technical articles, you scroll down. This is the definitive guide to S lenses, and you can see that actually is my camera bag. That is, yeah, that's okay. So I kind of explain here and read the article for more information, but you can see that basically I'm trying to demonstrate field of view on a 35 versus field of view on an S. And then I give examples for every single, photographic examples for every single focal length in the range, because I've shot with all of these lenses through, for the better part of 10 years.
More than 10 years.
More than 10 years, 12 years, something like that. So you can see a variety of images all the way back to the original. These are from the S2 and the 70 millimeter.
That holds up really well.
It holds up, this holds up remarkably well. Through various generations of cameras. Yeah, you remember
the
him?
cow farmer, yeah.
Didn't he have like a PhD or something?
Something crazy like that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pet the cows.
So the look that you get from these files are absolutely stunning. Some of it's the camera, and then of course also if you're into fashion or portraiture and you want to use lighting outside, having access to, I forgot that, central shutter of having a 1,000th of a second flash sync, you can use flash outside for creative effect. So definitely check this out. I try to go into some detail here, and
All right, let's get back.
It's a good intro to the system.
Next question. Nicely said.
Okay.
Well, before you do that, Jose, Blake had a question I want to answer about film cameras.
Oh, yeah.
Can you ask me that one?
Sure. I've never shot a roll of film. What would be a good first Leica film camera to learn on?
Oh, I love this question. First question you have to ask yourself, do you want a meter or not? If you do not want a light meter, I would say MA for something new, or M3 or M4 for something old.
Classic experience.
If you want a meter, I would say M6 or MP. As most people watching this episode probably realize, analog M cameras have become extraordinarily difficult to find. When we get them, they sell extremely quickly. They're very desirable. They just don't make that many anymore. MPs, black paint new, or years-long waiting list. So if you want something, you got to give me a heads up, and I'll let you know when I get it, because I have always stuff that's in for service.
And also, and if you're used to the digital M experience and you shoot an aperture priority,
actually, I got something for you, Blake.
You could use an M7.
I got something for you that's in Germany right now, getting CLA'd. Really, really special. It's almost too nice to use, but I know you're going to use it anyway, so we'll talk. Before we go, I want to talk about you have to let me float my workshop idea. I'll be quick.
After this,
fine.
This is a quick question.
Okay, that's fair.
From William, this last question is a really easy one to answer.
Can I ask you it?
Sure.
All right. William asks, what computer systems do you use for large files?
That answer used to be, and we actually had a 2-episode series on computers and post-processing and all that after capture. A lot has changed since then. Mainly, Apple has come out with their Apple Silicon, and I am a huge fan. I've got a 16-inch MacBook Pro with an M1 Max processor, and it chews through SL2 files, SL2 multi-shot, panos, M11 files like they're nothing. And it does so without the fan sounding like it's a jet engine. And the battery lasts forever.
Well said.
Just get a 16-inch or 14-inch MacBook Pro with an M1 Max or an M1 Pro, get 32 minimum gigabytes of RAM, I have 64, and be happy. I even use it at home now. I just plug my monitor into it. That's the easiest answer I can give you. There is other computers you can build and buy and whatever, but ultimately, I think the Apple's done just an incredible job with their in-house chips, and go to town.
All right, now you got to let me talk.
Now, Josh, I heard from you that you have some kind of crazy workshap idea. Please tell me more about this.
David and Peter don't think there's interest in this, but I do. So whenever we do one of these shows where I cover like all the 35 millimeter lenses, or there's a new camera, and I talk about all the different dynamic range and ISO differences between the predecessor and blah, 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 what I do before that is spend a day or more doing testing. So I'll gather up all the 35 millimeter lenses, all the 50s, all the whatevers, and then systematically test sharpness and bokeh and dynamic range and all of these different variables, and then analyze them and figure out. And I was doing this recently, and I thought to myself, I bet you there are some Leica nerds out there who would want to hang out with me for a couple of days, testing, playing with full comprehensive ranges of like all the 28s or all the 90s, and learning not only about the items, but how to test, how to evaluate, and how to then use that data to make the best selections for your photography or your collections. So if I were to host a workshop in the Leica store for like 2 days, 3 days of nerding out with Josh, testing cameras and lenses and learning how to use those metrics and those tests, I would want to know if anyone watching the show would be interested in a workshop like that in Miami, whenever. If you are, email me. You can email josh@leicastarmiami.com or info@leicastarmiami or whatever. Communicate with us in whatever fashion you're comfortable with. If you let me know you want to hang out with me and nerd out about cameras and do lens testing in Miami someday.
Enzo will be there too.
And Enzo will be there too. That's very important. So if there's genuine interest in this workshop, I will make Peter put it together for me. If there's not, well, then David wins Starbucks. So anyway, that's it. I just think it would be a cool experience.
I agree.
But listen, I got to know, will there also be discussion about lens caps?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Well,
Lens
depending on
hooks,
who
lens caps.
goes, if the real Leica nerds go, we can like have little deep dives about, metal push-on caps versus clip-on caps and, lens shades and screw-on shades and alternative shade options and rear cap differences. And we can go down whatever rabbit holes you want. Especially you just give me a couple of gin and tonics and I am like, we're done. It's going to be awesome. If you want to do it, it'll be a small group, super
What do you think,
cool
like
experience.
5 or 6 people?
I would say between 5 and 8 people, but no more than that. And again, just a couple of days with me doing testing. I would gather up a bunch of really cool pieces, some sort of what's like that, like anthologies, if you will, like
Well,
maybe
I think
10
we already
different
have 8
35.
people in the chat saying yes. So
See,
that's it.
email me though. You have to email me.
Wow.
I need like a written record, an email form that you would want to nerd out with Josh. And pay money. You got to pay money and come to Miami and turn it out with me. I promise you, you will not regret it. So prove me right, please.
You might regret it.
Maybe. A little teaser. All right. That's enough of that. Let's get on to some more questions. What do you got for us, Jose?
All right. David, can you comment on shooting for post on the M11 SO2? Do you go -2 or -3 on the exposure compensation?
Ooh, good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Because I have said this before. I've said it in person. I've said it on here. I very much do shoot for post-processing. And having just come off a trip where I shot a lot of M11 and a lot of trips just before that where I shot a lot with the SL2, I'm going to say the M11 definitely does have a little bit of an edge in terms of dynamic range, which we already discussed. And the metering is after the last firmware update where they added that. I mean, it actually is that the new algorithm is quite good, even to really contrasty lighting. In an outdoor scenario, I barely had to touch the exposure compensation.
Say that again.
I barely had to touch the exposure.
Using which metering mode?
The highlight weighted metering
Okay.
on the M11.
So this is a new feator in a lot. This is
That's
a
it.
new feature for Leica in general that we've been seeing.
Newish feature, yeah.
Coming on new. Okay,
Correct,
I just wanna-
correct.
Okay.
So not center weighted, not evaluative, but I'm using highlight weighted metering, which you can probably show them. Sure. Right.
I did clean it before the show started.
There you go.
So if we go, we can show it right here. So if you go to menu, exposure metering, you can see it right there. This is
Or on the quick menu too.
here. Boop.
Yeah, there it is.
Sweet.
Okay, so
excellent.
that is what I'm using, and I was actually kind of amazed that it was able to work the way it's supposed to at 0 or even just -1 exposure compensation. Now that all went out the window when I went into because I was in Paris doing a street photography workshop, which was a lot of fun. Thanks for everyone who joined in. Going and shooting in a church a cathedral, and it's really dark in there except for the windows, which are really, really bright. And I think the camera didn't prioritize that because it saw everything else dark. So I still had to dial in -2, -3 just to protect those highlights. But ultimately, because of that dynamic range, I was easily able to pull up the shadows to a pretty good degree. With the SL2, going back to my last landscape trip, I'd say I still need to kind of be at -1 to -2 most of the time, but I'm also shooting in a landscape scenario where it's generally really contrasty if I'm shooting a sunrise or a sunset, where I very, very, very much want to control and get all the detail I can in the brightest of highlights. sometimes even so much that 14 stops is not enough, and I'll just switch it into auto bracketing and do a three-shot sequence, 2 stops apart. So instead of getting 14 stops to dynamic range, I'm getting 18 stops in a single file. I think we covered a lot of that in our previous other episodes, but yes. So I do shoot for post. The M11, under most circumstances, I think the meter maybe has a slight edge over where the SL2 is, but only slightly. And it could just be because of various...
By the way, I'm already getting messages about the workshop. Keep those emails coming. If you want to nerd out with me, you want to do lens testing, email me and tell me.
Why is there
Prove him wrong.
beers and cameras?
Because we're going to get drunk, apparently. Sweet.
Open bar for the workshop?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We are going to have, we're going to have the store to ourselves, so we're going to set up a little open bar. David's going to bartend.
We got a great sound system in there?
Oh, it's going to be awesome. We're going to have a big nerding out lens testing party. It's going to be super fun. All
Amazing.
right. What's next, Jose?
But David, I would say that for most digital cameras, you always want to underexpose a little bit.
Generally, yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. The M system has always had a timeless quality, but flash drives have a predefined lifespan and degrades. What's your thoughts on the inclusion of an internal drive on the M11?
Well, the Leica T, which came out in 2014, had internal storage. That still works fine. I don't think it's as big of a deal as...
Let me just address this somewhat quickly.
Oh, gosh, here we go.
Flash storage, when it has a limited lifespan, it has a limited read and write cycle time, because basically there's a electronic component that's being flipped from 1 and 0 back and forth. That is a limited lifespan. But you're talking about hundreds of thousands of read and write cycles where it's flipping and erasing it and writing over it. In a computer, where, especially if you don't have a lot of RAM and it's using your drive to swap a lot, that can be, or high volume data like data processing or databases and things like that, then yes, you can burn through an SSD in 10 years. But in terms of the camera, where you're really not writing over that very often because you're not generating that kind of random high speed, high turnover data, I can't even imagine how long it would take you to do, 1 million hours or whatever write cycles. They call that durability, is the computer term for it, write durability. And Leica hasn't published a spec on it, but if it's regular SSD, it would take more than my lifetime to max that out if I took pictures every single day.
There you go. That's a good answer. I got a question coming in here, which is, we'll have a long answer, but the short version, this is from Mike. He's curious the differences between the M6 and the MP, talking about analog. Okay. The short version is that M6 is zinc, MP is brass and painted, M6 is plated or anodized, whatever you want to call it. MP has a superior viewfinder, better optics, so you can have an MP finder retrofitted into an M6. MP has better internals, stronger internals, better gears. It's like the penultimate Leica film camera in terms of build quality, feel. There's some cosmetic differences, like with the rewind knob and some other stuff like that. M6s were really, really inexpensive for a long time, making them a clear value winner over the MP. Now it's really more about what you can find and what you're looking for from a feature standpoint. There's still nothing in my mind more beautiful than a black paint MP. It's too beautiful to use, so I just get an M6 and beat the heck out of it. That's what I would do. We have an Analog M episode where we dive into that real deep, so you should check it out.
When was the MP introduced, Josh?
2003?
Yeah.
So the M6 is older than that.
The M6 was introduced in 1986.
The M6 has a lot of really cool...
84?
Something like that, yeah. That sounds right. M6 has a lot of really cool special editions. There are so many special edition M6s that are super, super, super cool. I'm not going to get into it now, but there's a lot.
And for a lot of people, because they made that camera for over 20 years,
the
M6 in some iteration, for a lot of people, that's kind of like the new classic Leica M that they always think of.
Yeah.
Because, what, they make 1 million of them or something?
Yeah. See, the thing about analog M's these days is I've become very picky about how I handle them. So pretty much every analog M that I get goes to Germany, the factory, and gets a complete overhaul. I'm having MP finders put in whenever possible. I'm having MP metal rewind frame advance levers put on whenever possible. I'm basically trying to turn these cameras into the best they could possibly be with the blend of where they were from new with what Leica can do today. So for me, I am trying to elevate the quality of what's out there for analog M's to make them both as to have the best value retention over time, but also the most usability.
Sure.
That's a long story, but
where in there is it that you then tell people not to use them?
Don't use them. No, they should. No, you can do whatever you want, but there's some cameras that are too nice to use. I think Black Paint MP. Oh, it's so hard for me to use that. I mean, if you bought a beat up one, but it
Pre-brassed.
It's so pretty. Everything else, though, go right ahead. Okay. What's next?
All right. Is there any difference in image quality from the 28 lux for M and the 28 lux on the Q2?
I think a 28 lux on the M11 for sure, or M10R. There's so many variables there that I can't answer that question straight up.
Remember the ISO showdown? I used the 28 Similux on the M10R and the M10 Monochrome versus the Q2 Monochrome and Q2 with the 28-1.4.
What do you think?
I mean, stop down at that particular thing in a clinical setting, they both are resolving about the same. I think at the end of the day, I think the 28-17 on the Q2 or Q2 Monochrome has added utility for a couple reasons, which is it has the macro functionality, which is fantastic.
Autofocus.
And it has autofocus.
And stabilization.
Sure. I mean, it does.
It's not the question isn't that simple, because if you're looking for the outright best image quality, which sounds like you are from that question, get a 28 lux on an M11, but you're spending almost $20,000.
Yeah.
You can get really, really good image quality and a lot of other benefits by spending $6,000 and change on a Q2 or a Q2 monochrome. So a lot to weigh there.
And I think, and how much is just a 28 Similux?
7,300, I think, or more. It's a lot.
So I often like to have this conversation where you can either, and that's why I think the Q2 or Q2 monochrome, I always call it an and camera, that this is like the best and camera in Leica's entire lineup, because this is my Q2 monochrome that's and my SL2. Well, why does it make sense for me? Because this is small light. I can take this out when I wouldn't necessarily take a full SL. They share the same battery, the same charger, which is great. And essentially have the same sensor inside-ish.
Blake, stop worrying about your film camera. I got you.
And
don't worry.
Okay, so for an SL person, a Q2 is great. And
well, same battery, same charger, right?
Same battery, same charger.
Operational.
Yeah, all the menus are the same, all that. Okay, but for an M shooter, it's also a great and camera, even though it's not the same battery, which is a little bit of a drag, but get over it.
I'm over it. I don't know about you.
But let's say that you don't always want a manual focus rangefinder and you want just a small, light autofocus camera with great image quality. Well, this is a great and camera to an M system. It's also that conversation I think we had, didn't we do in This or That? We did it. The This or That episode is a lot of fun too.
Wait, did we do this or that?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did it.
Are you sure? Man.
I'm pretty sure we did that. Jose, did we do This or That?
Or did we talk about it?
This or that?
No, we did does and don'ts, so we did what not to do.
No, I think we did this.
We didn't do this or that.
I think we did.
What you talking about?
I think we did that.
No.
Okay.
Anyway.
We should.
So now you don't even know.
I don't even know.
We're delusional.
But let's say you say, okay, should I get a 28 Similux for my M10R, my M11, or should I get a Q2 or Q2 monochrome to get my 28? And very often I would say get the Q2 because it gives you a backup body, it gives you autofocus, it gives you macro functionality, and you get a 28. So it's like, think about this whole camera as like a lens.
Well said. Next
Pretty
question,
sure
please.
we did this or
Next
that.
question, please. We definitely did not.
I'm looking it up.
Oh my goodness. Okay, you do that while I actually do the show.
Okay, go for it.
Go ahead.
All right. For travel landscape, would you rather complement a 35mm FLE with a tri-Elmar M or a 21 Elmar?
21 Elmar.
Okay. Is there a noticeable difference in sharpness, color over one or the other?
Yes. 21 Super Elmar is the best wide-angle M lens you can currently get. It has the ease of use of standard 46mm filters, unlike the tri-Elmar, which requires an adapter, and 77mm filters, or right, 77. So Unless I actually needed 16, and if that was really the case, I would bring an SL2 with a 1635.
It's very compact, very
But yeah,
tiny.
the wide-angle Traumar is super compact. It's a great lens, but for a kit where I'm trying to be as minimal as I can with the highest level of performance,
Yeah,
I'm gonna bring a 21 Super LMR. Especially if I'm polarizing or using NDs or anything like that.
You're always polarizing.
That is true. I am frequently polarizing. I'm not very ND most of the time.
Okay, so we didn't do this or that episode?
Of course we didn't do it into that episode. I was like,
Just
what
in my
are you-
mind.
What are you talking about?
Agreement.
Would you guys like a this
Of
or
course
that
they
episode?
would. They would like us just hanging out on the camera drinking beer for 2 hours. What are you talking about?
Ooh.
I could have said that. I'll have to Uber here so I don't have to drive home. All right, what's next, Jose?
All right. Is there an alternative lens shade for the 35mm Apo M that allows for filters to be removed, replaced without the need to remove the standard lens hood?
Not that I have found. So I use a thread ring because I use polarizers all the time. I just was out with the 35 Apo and a polarizer, and I just took off the hood, put a thread ring on there. That was it. I don't usually use hoods, so that's not a huge surprise.
Okay. Quick question here. For low light scenarios, what is the max ISO and other settings for the M11 handheld?
Sure. Max ISO,
Well,
what are you shooting?
the Mac, well, you know the answer to that is it depends.
It does depend.
Depends on your tolerance for noise and
Are you
your
shooting,
output.
Yeah. Are you shooting a high detail landscape where nothing's moving in the frame and you could shoot a slower shutter speed? Or are you shooting fast moving things at night, street photography, live performance, something like that, and you need to prioritize shutter speed over ISO? So you need to make those decisions about where your threshold is for noise, where your threshold is for motion. And I covered this in my M11 review where I kind of had both of those scenarios,
Which you should read.
which you should read.
In fact, you should show that really quick because, sorry to interrupt you, but it's actually amazing with a ton of really good sample images. Now that the M11 is a little more mature in the market, I think it's still worth a visit if you're not sure about it. You can find that to show in there.
Okay.
Here we go.
So this is under reviews, and this is the
Yeah.
M11 review. So I'm just going to show two samples, which is one, if I can find it. I'm sorry. These are big images. That's why even over our
It's an
crazy
in-depth
connection.
review, but it's very thorough. Excuse me.
ISO performance. Look at that.
Looks like you overexposed it there a little bit.
Wow. Wow. Too soon.
What happens with our 1,000 megabyte per second internet connection? What is this?
I don't know. Yeah, we have
The
it.
lighting storm out here.
There we go.
You can let it load. Okay, you got it?
Sorry, yeah. Okay, so I found, certainly for night photography, you can clearly see that, look, that's 8,000 ISO if it ever loads because all the other pictures are loading. Now I need to give it a second. That's 800, that's 10, I mean, this is 10,000. Wow. I love our internets right now. I should have preloaded all this stuff, right? No. Okay. So this is 10,000 ISO. I think it looked great. I still have a 60th of a second, which is no problem to handhold. Trying to find. Sometimes you need to freeze action. So here, this is at night, but I prioritized shutter speed, which was 320th of a second to freeze motion, 320th of a second to freeze motion. The ones I was actually trying to find was this, which,
There you go.
yeah, this is it.
This
Now,
is crazy.
okay, so you talk about that threshold. And this shot here is with the 50 millimeter aposumachron. It's at 5.6. It's 8,000th of a second. And it's still, there we go. And it's it's 8,000 ISO. It looks pretty darn good. But if I zoom in and get in on the shadows here, it's not perfect. You know, it definitely is losing a little bit of that detail. So what did I try? Because I'm up for experimentation. This is 1600 ISO, which is so much cleaner than 8000, even under perfect circumstances. And with a 90 millimeter, I was able to handhold at a 15th of a second because I used self-timer and I used the electronic shutter to completely eliminate vibration. And it ended up being tack sharp. It's also really, really clean, even into the shadows. So that was kind of nice. And this was another example.
That's
here.
a sixth of a second.
Yeah, that's 1/6 of a second, handheld
Crazy.
at 1600 ISO, again, using self-timer and electronic shutter. And because there's no movement in the camera at all, the shutter's not even moving, I was able to just kind of hold real steady, snap the self-timer, hold my breath, breathe out, whatever technique works for you, click. And I just did it like maybe 2 or 3 times just to try to see if I could get a sharp one. Turns out they were all sharp. And and it works great. So where's your threshold for that? And then the second thing would be, okay, I'm showing here live performance. Clearly there's performers who are moving on stage, and freezing the action is more important. And this is a 10,000 ISO, but for the intended purpose, it's not a landscape. This is fine. You know, it has that mood, it has the feel, and stopping the action is far more important. I'm able to keep 160th of a second because I wouldn't want to go slower because it just wouldn't work. And I wanted depth of field, so I'm shooting at 5.6 with a 24. So definitely check out the article. There's lots of images under various circumstances. And my primary goal there was just to push the camera as far as I could under as many different situations, in low light, in hard light, whatever, flat light, to see what it could do.
And I think you did that.
And that would be your answer.
Nice. All right. Well, that was a good answer. Next question.
All right. Let's see. I'm very close to moving up from my SL Type 601 to the SO2. I keep jumping around from the SO2S to the SO2. I shoot primarily landscapes and nature, and figure the SO2 will be my best fit. What do you think?
I agree.
I mean, we talked about this in our Where Are We Now SL System episode a few weeks or months ago at this point. But essentially, if you're going to stay at or below ISO 6400 most of the time, SL2. If you're going to spend a lot of time at 6400 and above, SL2S.
Well, he kept the question going and said, I also shoot low light quite often. Help. So.
Well, low light doesn't necessarily mean high ISO, because if you're on a tripod, it doesn't matter. Or if you're at 3200 or you have a bunch of Summoluxes, you just have to decide which is more important, the outright highest resolution or the outright best low light performance, understanding that the SL2 can still give you good low light performance, just not as good.
And the image stabilization is stupidly good.
Yes.
You can handhold, again, if you're shooting landscape in low light, in my mind, it's either going to be hand-holdable because your subject's not moving a lot, or, you know, where you could get away with a 30th or a 15th handheld in those scenarios where you should have brought a tripod but didn't.
Well, you also have the multi-shot mode on the SO2S.
You could,
depending on what you're shooting.
Yeah.
but that's going to limit you to 1 second longest exposure, which often isn't quite enough for, you know, most dramatic light where you may want a 5-second exposure, 6-second exposure.
Choices.
And I'd say if you're in low light and you're shooting landscape, you should definitely use a tripod because the results will be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Okay.
Or just have both.
Let's not go there. Next question, please.
All right, let's see.
What is this one here?
What?
I just want to say to the last question about the differences between the Noctilux, we have an entire episode dedicated to the Noctilux series of lenses where we show in real time how the different versions compare, and we dive deep into that. So there's no answer I can give on this episode that will be more comprehensive than that. So when the show is over, go search our channel for Noctilux episode, and you will learn more than you ever knew you needed to know.
Did you see the question about the 90?
No, what's that? Ask me.
Is there an adapter ring that will fit the 90 millimeter Apo M lens so you can use the L Pro for macro?
No, yes and no. You can get a step down ring from 55 to 52 and use the L Pro with a decent amount of vignetting. It is not worth.
I don't even know if you get vignetting with this.
I've tried it. You get
angle of view.
It depends on where you are, but it's not great. The reality is the 90 Apo is not a super sharp lens until you start stopping it down. And that's only exacerbated for macro. I just wouldn't use it for that. I mean, you could always get the macro adapter and put it behind it. Not great.
Mm-hmm.
Get a 90 macro, which is way sharper, way flatter field, way better for macro work, thus why it's called the 90 macro. And it has a 39 millimeter filter thread, which is well within the threshold of the 52 millimeter maximum size of the L-Pro.
Yep.
That's my answer. Watch our macro episode. If you want.
Yes.
We have a really, really good
We
macro
do.
episode that covers all of that in ridiculous detail.
That was also one of my favorite episodes.
That was a lot of fun. And then we incorporated a wristwatch, which was always fun too. So
That is always fun.
next question.
All right. Is it possible to use flash on the SO2 and SO2S other than a Leica flash?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of flashes will work in manual. I don't know about
Manual
DTL.
mode, yeah.
Or an A mode even.
Yeah, I just haven't tried them. I don't use a lot of flash. So Jose, maybe you could
That's
speak
a
to this.
Jose question.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used a couple on manual, but I don't know about like all of them or like, how many
Yeah,
they
I would
work,
try it
but
before you buy it. But I
heard that,
couldn't.
like some Nikon ones or
What about like the Profoto A series or B series?
Well, the air trigger works in manual mode. I've done
Not,
that.
I mean the on-camera one, like the
I've never tried
Profoto A whatever.
in manual. Why not?
yeah, I think the Godaks and the Profoto work, but again, it's on manual.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's gonna have
Yeah, there's no
TTL
TTL,
or
that's
anything.
all.
So
Next question.
Oh, this is a good one. For documentary filmmaking, which camera and/or lens would you recommend?
SL2S.
Yes.
Well, and the lens is going to depend on your
lens?
creative objectives.
24 to 70?
Yeah, convenient.
Jose?
No?
What do you think?
Depends. I mean, again, it's very specific to whatever you're doing, but I like M lenses to shoot video on the SO2S.
It also, yeah, it depends on the scenario and if you're in a controlled setup where you're doing an interview.
Gun, is it?
Yeah, is it run and gun where like
Yeah.
you need the flexibility of being able to
You
shoot
need,
wide?
what
or
you need to
long?
do is watch our It Depends episode. Come back. Because we always need context. But
Watch our video episode.
Jose, we don't have that yet.
Hey.
Don't torture them. Look, they're in the LHSA. I threatened an Arlen's episode, and of course everyone was like, "Yeah, so we want an Arlen's episode," and I was like, "Who's gonna loan me their Arlen's collection?" So
Here you go. Here's the
there's
Arlen.
two out of the 60 that I need. So yeah, maybe in 2020 something.
2030.
Yeah. Yes. When Leica brings back the R system. Oh, I should have said that.
Okay.
Jose, what's next? What else we
We're
got?
getting in real trouble now.
I know. That can't be all the questions.
What
No.
presets do you recommend for the Q2 Monochrome? I don't see one on Red Dot Forum.
You see, before you say anything, David dug himself into a hole by offering some presets for Lightroom because now he's supposed to apparently have presets for every single camera. What I do is I grab one of his presets for a different camera, I apply it, I modify it a little bit to work on the new camera I'm using, and then I save that as my new preset.
Which is ironically what I do too.
There you go. So I'm sorry, but David is busy buying plaid shirts for himself and for me, so he can't be making more presets for Lightroom. But you can do what I do, and ironically, now what I just learned he does, which is build on his existing presets, because obviously, fundamentally,
They're
a
all the
lot
same,
of the cameras are getting very similar base levels of edits with some tweaks.
Correct.
And also remember that a preset is still a season to taste concept, meaning what David likes may not be what you like, but again, you can still take his preset, modify it so you like it, and then save that as a new preset.
That, what Josh said.
Sorry, I knew you were going to give a complicated answer, so I'm like, maybe just.
I was actually going to say what you just said.
All right, fine. Yes. Oh my goodness. All right.
Or I was going to hide under the table.
That too. That's with Enzo, right?
Yeah, you
Oh.
need snuggles.
He's so sleepy. What's
All
next?
Are there any negative effects on regularly using S lenses on the SO2, auto/manual focusing, as I prefer using S lenses as they have more character than SL lenses?
No. Just like mount on it. Yeah, just a normal lens.
Just a little bit slower, but
Yeah, I mean, the autofocus is noisier and slower,
It'll take more battery life.
but functionally it works fine.
Yeah.
There's
Just
no problem.
make sure to have one extra battery.
Yeah, that's all.
And make sure when you change lenses that you
Turn the camera off. Yeah,
Yeah.
always turn the camera off when you're changing lenses with that adapter.
all right. Which are the most popular used digital Leica cameras?
That depends on when, because there's
Week by
usually
week?
usually it's the predecessor to whatever's current. Like right now, M10, M10R are super popular. Used Q2 is super popular. So I would say Q2 or Q or M10. Yeah, I don't see a lot of 240s anymore. So really, I think M10 and M10R.
Which is a shame, actually.
Yeah, they kind of disappeared. Especially the black paint models are really, really nice.
Ooh, MP240s? Super nice.
I just don't see them. Good question though.
Okay. Are Leica UV filters superior to the third-party ones?
I think Breakthrough probably makes the best UV filter from a performance standpoint, although I haven't actually put it side by side. with a
You
Leica
can do that
filter.
during your workshop.
Yes, could do that. The nice thing about the Leica filters is they match the lenses perfectly.
They do.
And they're generally readily available with some exceptions, whereas Breakthrough is like super hard to get. I don't think there's a big difference. I don't think there's enough of a difference to impact your image quality in a negative way. You're more likely to impact that negatively by a fingerprint or a scratch or debris on the filter or lens than you are the filter itself.
Sure.
That's my answer. I'm sticking to it.
Let's go. Or more. Are there certain lenses you should always buy from Germany
From Germany? What do you mean?
instead of Canada or Portugal?
No. It doesn't. There's very, very few lenses that were made more than one place. Yes, there's the made in Portugal lenses, which is a short run for tariffs and stuff. But no, I mean, the 75 Summilux, German and Canadian, okay, the German ones are more expensive, but there's no. Unless you're like a collector and looking for that, there's no reason to do that.
And if you want to be really super cool,
Yes.
you should, if you can find, I'm going to give them a quest.
Oh, go ahead.
Find a 50 millimeter f1 Noctilux made in Germany.
I've heard there's a few.
And we'll give you a special prize.
That's like $1 million lens if you can
Yeah,
find one. Yeah.
no. Almost all of them, 99 point blah, blah, blah %, were made in Canada. So, yeah.
All right.
What's next?
I bought a new 35 FLE and it was slightly front focusing on my M11 and M10. It's heading off for calibration. How often do you find this to happen with new lenses?
Pretty rare. It definitely happens. It's a couple of times a year. I mean, it's like kind of count on one hand the number of times that happens. It's really not that common.
No, not anymore.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's not a huge pervasive issue. It can happen. I mean, they're handmade products. There can be issues. Something could happen in transit, but it's not something that I see very often. I'm really trying to think of the last time that a new lens was sold to someone and was out of calibration. I genuinely cannot remember. May not even have had that happen this year that I can think of. That's how uncommon it is, at least for me. What else we got?
Okay, let's see.
And remember, if you want to have a workshop with me where you learn about super nerdy lens testing, camera testing, you have to email me and tell me you want to do it. Because I need to prove David wrong that people will pay lots of money to hang out with me and a bunch of vintage, crazy, cool cameras and lenses for a couple days. I'm counting on you. Seriously.
Let's see. What is your favorite national park that you shot in?
My favorite national park?
Sure.
For photography? I like Olympic National Park. Let's say if I'm going to go for U.S. national parks, I love the the forests and the rainforest there, and the beaches are really cool with the sea stacks, and it's basically the same weather year round, which is really nice. It's nice and cool and temperate, and as long as you have waterproof stuff, you're great. I guess I preferred that over. I think it's also more. You can kind of get in your own space. You don't have to go to a park like Zion where you have to be on a tram for an hour to get to one of the park and it's closed. And you just drive your own car and you park where you want and you get out and you walk. So I kind of like that. But the national park system in our country is awesome. So I like a lot of the national parks for various reasons, some more for photography than others, but I'll go with Olympic.
I'll take Everglades National Park because that's the one I can drive to from my house.
Not my favorite to photograph in, I gotta say.
No. Although Paul
mosquitoes-
Marcellini has made amazing photographs.
He has.
So clearly it's a lack of skill on our part. 'Cause he's,
I think it's a lack of tolerance of mosquitoes
also true, and alligators
humidity and
yeah,
alligators
fair enough.
and like flesh-eating bacteria.
Fair enough. What was the other question I saw? For a monochrome photographer, you can follow. Someone said Alex Scheller, Louis J, who actually just led our Paris workshop.
Yeah.
Is an amazing monochrome photographer. So someone you should check out.
Also, Richard Sexton,
Richard Sexton.
who leads
that's
our
right.
monochrome workshop
That's
in New
true.
Orleans. So there's a lot of really great monochrome black and white photographers. Another one that I really like and was featured in the LA gallery is Kira Crowell. She does really good landscape work in black and white.
Okay.
Fantastic mountainscapes and things like that. So she's another one at Cira Crowell.
Yes.
But I mean, there is so many. I'd say if you're looking for someone to follow on Instagram, just go like search for hashtags Leica and and Monochrome, and you are bound to find some great
some cool
photography.
stuff on there. All right, we have time for like two or three more questions.
All right. I have a 50mm Summilux M, but super compelled to get the new 50mm 1.2 Noctilux. If you were carrying both with you, when would you switch that lens to max out both looks?
Well, a Noctilux, the concept behind a Noctilux is vintage look, the 1.2 Noctilux specifically, vintage look and taking advantage of the shadow depth of field. So if I had an opportunity where I had a subject, either I was going to focus very closely on or that had a lot of background behind it, like a person standing in the middle of a street with the whole street behind, where you could actually see some of the bokeh and the effect, I'd use the 1.2. If I was doing something where sharpness mattered and performance mattered, I'd use the 1.4. I think the Noctilux blessing and curse is that it's very easy to overuse it so that all the pictures look like that, and then suddenly everything starts to look kind of the same. So the 1.4 being a more modern lens, more practical, more everyday, I'd probably use 80% of the time. And then for the times where I really wanted to get that cool vintage look, especially when I had that separation capability, I would pull out the 1.2. But I'd probably bring a 50 Apo at a 1.2. I don't think I'd bring a 51.4 at a 1.2. I'd want as much of a gulf in between the two from a look and performance standpoint as I could.
Because 50 lux wide open, close up, is still going to give you a really pretty...
Yeah, but nothing like the 1.2.
No.
But
Well,
again,
it's going to be resolved.
yeah, it's going to be sharp. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
sharper.
Yeah. All right, what else we got?
Advantages and disadvantages of using a Leica CL with M lenses versus with M mount lenses for travel.
We actually have an article about that too. There's an article about using CL lenses on M lenses on a CL. The disadvantage is going to be the crop factor, number one. So you're going to get a 1.5x crop factor, which I think is going to change the character quite significantly on a lot of the M lenses. So a 28 that would normally be, a decent wide angle street lens is now going to become a 42. It becomes kind of limiting in that regard, unless you want to shoot everything, longer. But wider lenses are going to be at a premium. So you'd have to get a 21 Super Elmar to equate to a 28.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really recommend that. I'd say, and was the choice between that and a 240? I think
No, he didn't specify.
any M in general. I would rather have a 240
yeah.
for M lenses, which they're going to be. 240 is more expensive than a CL, not that much more, but a lot more flexible.
Oh, I'd even say, what about a used SL601?
Or that. I would get a CL to use CL lenses,
Yeah.
APS-C lenses, and I would get an M or an SL to use M lenses, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What else we got? We got time for one more.
Yeah, got one more here. Hold on, just lost it. Okay, if you could only buy one lens for an M11 for street photography, what would you choose? Not that one.
FLE, 35.4.
Probably.
Or the Cron.
Ron is cool, but I like the ability to shoot it wide open. I like the look of 1.4. Not that you're doing a lot of street at 1.4,
Although,
but
I have to say, lens that is really an underdog for street, having just shot a week of street,
okay.
21 Super Elmar. I just mentioned it because you can legitimately dial in hyperfocal distance, and it's so fast to be able to, get up in anywhere, and it's also just looks really cool when you can shoot that wide, but it's really not that distorted, and yeah, it's great.
I would also say 28 Sumeron. So tiny.
Could be.
You can do some cool stuff with the Sumeron.
Yeah.
Well, that is very true. That's a fun, quirky little lens. All right, one more question.
Someone else says 21 Super Elmar too.
What else we got? Remember, while Jose's looking, we got 3 spots left for the Iceland workshop, August 23rd to December 1st this summer.
Yep.
It's going to be sweet. So if you're looking for some super cool photo adventure, hang out with a bunch of other Leica photographers, 3 spots. Sign up on our website. Do it. Okay. What else?
Don't really have
All right.
more.
Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. Our next show is going to be this coming Saturday, the 18th. I don't think we've figured out what we're going to do yet. Something fun, hopefully. Oh, they're all fun. While David is poking around.
There's one more that
I think we're okay. It's about...
What's that? Yeah, there's definitely some questions here.
Well, I know.
We started just a few minutes late.
What?
Right in the bottom, Blake is asking if you're shooting through a window, does that kind of mess up?
No, only if you put the window right in front of the lens. Otherwise, it's just a window in your shot. There was some. We're all right. I think we've covered a
Interesting
lot.
stuff.
You could leave a comment as well. I want to thank before we wraps up. I want to thank the LHSA again for hosting us and letting us do our show in Colorado Springs. It was awesome. David and I were super excited to meet a lot of you in real life, and we had a lot of fun. If you were there, you know that we were just having a blast. I was going wild. Can't wait to do that again. And again, email me if you want to do the Nerding Out with Josh workshop, because if we get enough people who are serious about it, we will put it together. I think I have anything else crazy to cover.
Well, there's quite a lot of comments. I can't read all that because...
Why don't you sign us off? And you know what? We're going to have a show next week. So if there's any lingering questions, we'll be back in a week. So do not worry.
We will be, right?
18th.
So mark your calendars. We will be back. If you're not already, please subscribe to Red Dot Forum YouTube channel, because as soon as usually when we have a live stream coming up, we'll post on Wednesday or Thursday prior to the Saturday where we go live. So you see that we have an upcoming episode, and you can click to follow that and be notified when we go live. So you definitely want to do that. And if you like what we did in this video, our 50th, hard to believe, give us a thumbs up, because it makes us feel good, you know? It's like a little pat on the back. And if you have any further burning questions, because either you missed this live and you're watching it on a replay, or we didn't get to your particular question, or maybe you have a follow-up, or something we said inspired you to like, oh my gosh, what about this? Leave us a comment when the video, probably about an hour from now, which would be 11 o'clock Eastern time. Leave a comment. It'll be in the permanent video, and we'll be able to look at those tomorrow when we arise after brunch. Do we get brunch?
No, I'll be at the store tomorrow.
Anyway, we'll answer your questions the best we can. And if you have any ideas for both future episodes that you'd love us to see, give us a comment on that. I also am curious what your favorite episodes were. Because we got some, but I didn't get a chance to read all those. So please let us know what you think was your favorite, and if you want us to revisit certain things or talk about other things or whatever. We're open to all ideas, because frankly, after 50 episodes, we're running out of...
We are?
Nope.
I have like at least another 10 ideas.
Right, but they involve like...
I know, they're elaborate. That's fine.
Elaborate.
I'm an elaborate kind of guy. Don't worry about it.
Anyway, as always, big thanks for tuning in, because the only reason we're here for 50 episodes is because you keep watching us and
for some ridiculous
reason and giving us a reason to come back every so often and torture you guys with our Leica nerdiness. Speaking of which, big thanks to Josh, the ultimate Leica nerd. Thanks to Jose, the much cooler Leica nerd.
True.
And
thanks to Julie hanging out in the chat.
Thanks to Julie for hanging out tonight. And I saw telling her sob story about the CM that was...
Sore subject.
Yes. Sore subject.
Kids.
And still shout out to Kirsten and Peter, who are still great parts of our team. Even
and Adam. Don't forget about Adam.
I don't know if Adam's joining us tonight.
No, but he's around.
Shout out to Adam, too. Sure, why not?
There we go.
Hey, Adam.
Enzo.
And Enzo, who's sleeping up a storm.
That's right.
So have a good rest of the weekend, and we will see you next week for our next episode. Until then, go out and shoot something with a camera.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.